All right, welcome to Bet the Edge. I'm Jay Croucher here with Drew Dinsick. We're going to talk today about the NFL schedule release, some notable week one lines out of that. We'll talk about quick thought about the Premier League and then Knicks-Pacers and the frustrating Thunder-Mavs series. And then we'll close out with some Stanley Cup. But Drew, how are you, mate? What's news?
Oh, hanging in there. Tennis going great. Basketball, the OKC loss to the Mavericks that was a bummer. To make matters worse, I feel like I got absolutely hosed on a push in the Boston Cleveland game. Like, no idea how that landed 15. Just a joke. It was a weird day of basketball yesterday, and just need the Celtics to take care of business to close a hole in my book, and we're all good in the Eastern Conference Finals.
Indeed. Well, yeah, they should take care of business in the East, at least, certainly. But we'll talk about the NBA in a sec. Let's start with the NFL. The season kickoff on NBC. Ravens at Chiefs. Drew. Chiefs are 2.5-point favorites there. The total is 47.5. Any thoughts on this game or any just macro thoughts about the schedule release?
Yeah, couple of them. I guess first macro thought, if you take a giant step backwards, we already knew who everybody's opponent was because that's formulaic. There's no guesswork as to who's going to play who. It's all sequencing. And the kind of leveling factors that the NFL has at its disposal to try to make things more fair are rest advantage and travel advantage. And basically the travel advantage is always straightforward. Like, if you're on the West Coast, you're at a disadvantage because you're going to be flying east a bunch. And it's just a matter of if those are clustered and you can stay in the East or what. And then the other kind of key factor with the schedule release that I'm always intrigued is who, where are the international games? Where do they land on people's schedules? Who is losing a home game to an international game? Who is put in the who gets put in the jackpot against the Jags? When the Jags have stayed in London for an extra week, and finding all of that stuff out was pretty interesting. But I guess my key macro takeaway of the schedule overall was it felt like the NFL did a very, very sincere job to try to level things with the way they penalize certain teams with rest. They penalize certain teams with travel and kind of opponent clustering to take away some of the advantages that were present for the teams that had, just gotten, fortunate with their opponents over the balance of the season. And so that was my general read as I looked at which teams got penalized for rest and travel and things like that. Opening night, sending I think it was a good choice to send Baltimore to Kansas City. That's going to be a really fun game. Definitely don't expect a ton of movement off of 2.5 at this point because there is usually a little bit of momentum for the home team on banner night, but Ravens we know are a pretty tough matchup for the Chiefs in pretty much every way. So that's going to be a really competitive game. Excited to see how some of the available weapons shape up for the Kansas City Chiefs, namely is Rashee Rice going to play, and that's going to that could potentially matter there. Similarly, the Ravens have had they have Zay Flowers maybe in line for suspension as well. It's tough to say. So, just available weapons in the wide receivers for both teams is kind of worth following there. 47.5 feels a little on the high side for a total, but not a huge diversion from what we saw in the playoffs last year when it was in Baltimore and there was no weather. So don't take huge exception to that. And ultimately just going to be a really fun game. It is noteworthy that the Ravens tend to come into a season hot because they take the preseason very seriously. And so I think if this hits through, I would have some interest in Ravens. Otherwise, I'm probably going to be a spectator on Thursday.
Yep, that makes sense. I mean, in theory, this should be one of the easiest games for the market to price outside of the Rashee Rice uncertainty. Because outside of that, I mean, I know there's turnover every year with every roster, but it's, we kind of know what the Ravens are. We kind of know what the Chiefs are. And also the Ravens, their last game was against the Chiefs. So I think it may look a little bit different to that clash, but at the same time, 2.5 seems right to me. Cowboys at Browns, another big marquee game, Sunday, 4:25. The line there is Cowboys -1.5. The total is 43.5. Any thoughts on this one?
Another kind of early benchmark for both of these teams, really. The Cowboys are in a really interesting place in terms of, are they really winning now? What is sort of what is the expectation of this team this season? They had one of the least, I guess, active free agencies, and there's a lot of holes on this roster. They didn't have a ton of draft capital. They did what they could with the picks they had, but it didn't really move the needle for me in terms of, oh wow, you've done a really nice job here of finding some guys who can start week one. Like the linebacking core for the defense is a huge weakness. They lost their defensive coordinator. They have offensive line questions all the way across the board, and the skill position group is CeeDee Lamb and a bunch of question marks. And so it to me looks like the Cowboys are a little bit overrated by market if we're going to get numbers like this where they're favored on the road against the Browns, because the Browns are a good team. They're a complete team. They managed to keep their defensive coordinator, who had one of the most violent and awesome pass rushes we've ever seen, and Myles Garrett is going to be 100% week one, so I don't really see any reason to doubt that the Browns defense is going to show up in this game. And then the Browns quarterback is like probably the biggest question mark of anything heading into the season, because if he is the player that we have seen at his best, Deshaun Watson and the Browns should be realistically considered contenders to win the AFC. And if he is the guy that we saw, at the low points of 2023, and or just unavailable or, incapable of producing at a high level, then the Browns are going to be and also ran kind of on the fringes of the playoffs again. So, a big, gigantic uncertainty band around the Browns right now. But I don't agree that the Cowboys should be favored on the road in that spot.
Yeah, I think I agree with that take. I think the Browns just having tackles again will be very helpful. So they didn't have any for the back half of last season. To me, the most interesting thing about Dallas is, one, what does their offensive line look like? There's been turnover there. Like Tyler Guyton is going to be the starting left tackle, I guess. Not sure he's necessarily ready for that. And then you have Terrence Steele on the other side. So not great after the stability at tackle. Well, relative stability when Tyron Smith's been out there, that Dak Prescott has had. But the other thing to me with Dallas is just how much does Trayvon Diggs coming back, how much does that alter what their defense looks like? Because before he went down last year, I know it was a small sample, he looked like the best cornerback in the league or close. And pairing him with Deron Bland, who has his flaws, but is still a very good corner, I wonder how much that just changes the defense. I think it's a good kind of case study for what a shutdown corner does and the ripple effects across the rest of your defense. Because as good as Dallas's defense was statistically, it always felt very kind of vulnerable, and it did get absolutely destroyed by some elite offenses like San Francisco in that Sunday night game, by the Packers, obviously, in the playoffs, by the Lions towards the end of the season too. They moved the ball seemingly at will. Geno Smith had the best game of his career against the Cowboys. So Diggs coming back, and one, looking like himself, and then two, just being an upgrade on Stephon Gilmore as a kind of de facto shadow corner number one, I think will be interesting. But yeah, I thought this game would be pick. Last one, Sunday night on NBC, Rams at Lions, rematch of the playoff encounter. Lions -3, total is 51. Do you think there's any reason to think this is going to look much different than when they met in the playoffs?
Yeah. No Aaron Donald. And the market is sleeping on this, man. Aaron Donald is not playing unless there's some surprise on retirement coming. And he is massively important to this Rams defense. I am going to come into the season cold on the Rams because of that. Almost certainly. And, the ability for the Rams to create pressure on Jared Goff all of a sudden looks less compelling. The Lions did a decent job of fortifying everything that I thought was a weakness of this roster with the way that they approached the draft and free agency. And I don't know that this Lions team is now elevated to, close to San Francisco at the top of the NFC, but they're absolutely worthy of consideration for upgrade relative to what we saw last season, even at their highs. And this season now, the Rams, I think, are going to have a long way to go to get back up to what I thought was, a top 4 team in the NFC last year because of the absence of Donald, and just what that means for the rest of that very, very young defense. There's, potentially an opportunity to look at this offense for the Rams and think that, with health, kind of a fully healthy campaign, or at least a start to the fully healthy campaign from Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua, that, hey, this team can go toe to toe with an offense that's producing points. Okay, sure. But there are aspects of the defensive side of the ball, new coordinator, no Hall of Famer anchoring your D line, that I think the Lions are going to be able to have a little bit easier time here producing points. And it's an indoor game. There are going to be points scored. The just aggressive nature of Dan Campbell versus the quasi conservatism that Sean McVay brings to the table was, I thought, the difference in that playoff game. And I think it's right to think that the Lions are 3 points better at home in their home opener. Just in general, man, what an amazing week 1 slate overall. It kind of almost feels like, and they did this last year too, I think, where you just got lots of really intriguing stuff to chew on in week 1. I kind of wish they had saved some of it to sprinkle in 2, 3, 4, 5 as I look at the schedule, because there are some lean times coming in the early portion of the season. But this is going to be a great way to kick off Sunday Night Football. And I think at price, I'm a little bit inclined to lead Lions at 3, just based on being cool on the Rams in the absence of Aaron Donald.
Yeah, I think one of the most interesting units this year is the Detroit defense, which was a weakness last year, but now they made some little upgrades around the edges, took some flyers on guys like Marcus Davenport. I think that Carlton Davis coming in, just competent corner, and they've got these young guys with a lot of talent who have already shown plenty, who are going to be a year older in Hutchinson and Melifonwu and Brian Branch and Alan McNeil. And I think there's the potential for this to be a good unit after being a unit that you just hope didn't kill you last season. So, yeah, I'm pretty bullish on Detroit overall. Before we pivot to the soccer, any favorite futures angle at the moment in the NFL coming out of the schedule release or just in general?
Yeah, we talked about it yesterday a little bit in your absence, and I'll bring it back and get your take on this. But I think the Bengals are in a really nice spot. I like what they did roster-wise. I like that they retained Big Lou on the defensive side. I like that, so it looks like with free agency in the draft, the Bengals look like a very, very competent team. And the opponents that they drew relative to the rest of the AFC North is hugely favorable. And kind of synthesizing all that into, well, if you get a full, we still have yet to see, amazing as it sounds, we have yet to see kind of a full off season and preseason where Joe Burrow is healthy and kind of vibing with this team. And so if that happens, then, coming out hot and having the schedule kind of in their favor, this Bengals team, I think, is going to get real short to be the, 1 seed in the AFC. Even right now, that's something like 5-1 to happen. And if that happens, I don't understand the price on Zach Taylor, coach of the year, at 25-1. I know that their win total is sky high, but this has kind of been shaken a little bit with what we're seeing recently. And I think, a healthy campaign from Burrow and a 13-14 win season of the Bengals is not crazy. And at that point, Zach Taylor 25-1 looks pretty fun. So I've been back into that a little bit as a way to get some upside exposure on the Bengals, because I could see the AFC going through them, considering how much easier their schedule is than everybody else, aside from the Chiefs, who actually have a pretty easy schedule.
Yeah, which helps with Mahomes MVP, which is still like 7-1, which I'll just never understand why he keeps opening there every season. I think he should just be like plus 275 every year until further notice. The Bengals having that 4th place schedule is a huge differentiator in the division, particularly compared to Baltimore having extra games, I believe, against the Bills, Texans, and Bucks. whereas the Bengals are playing the fourth place team in those divisions, which is much easier. The one that I will throw out there, Breece Hall is 30-1 to win Offensive Player of the Year. And I long thought that this market, OPOY, should just be extremely tethered and correlated to fantasy ADP, because this is a statistical production award that has team success elements in there. But particularly when you're dealing with running backs, there's generally going to be a pretty decent correlation there. Breece Hall is the number 2 running back in fantasy behind Christian McCaffrey. He is going to get a ton of work. The last time we saw Breece Hall, he's getting 38 carries in a game. They're not going to drop back and throw a million times at Aaron Rodgers at quarterback. It's a much improved offensive line. I think he's going to put up gigantic counting stats. He has all the talent in the world. All the underlying stuff has always been fantastic with Breece. And I don't think that he is, I don't think he should be 30-1 to win Offensive Player of the Year. I think he should be a tier 1 favorite alongside guys like McCaffrey and Justin Jefferson. And I think Breece Hall is more likely to win that award than Jamar Chase, given that Chase is a wide receiver who plays in cold weather and is just going to have games where he gets destroyed because of the conditions. So Breece Hall, OPOY 30-1, my favorite bet at the moment.
I love it. I love that. Real quick on that. I had a brief conversation with a smart person yesterday about, will we ever see a 2,000-yard rusher again? And I was like, we might see it this year with Breece Hall, because like the rest of that backfield is not taking reps from him, and he's got young legs and he looks ready to go. So that would be a fun way to capitalize on that. And honestly, like if the Jets had replaced Hackett as OC this year, I'd probably be pretty bullish on Jets right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think that their schedule, in a way, the sequencing helps that they play all these rookie quarterbacks in the first 5-6 weeks. Like that's one, I think that's when you want to play rookie quarterbacks. And then 2, it's a new team. And like if Rodgers and the Jets were having to open, I mean, they open the season at San Francisco, that's not ideal, but then it eases up after that. But if their season was going to open like San Francisco, Buffalo, Kansas City or whatever, like that's pretty rough to basically throw this team out for the first time against that. But the fact that they play like the Titans and the Patriots and the Broncos, they should be able to build some momentum at the start of the season. And yeah, I think Breece is going to get a ton of work. And I've always, and some people are against me on this idea, but I've always thought that deep down, people want to vote for a running back for this award, because a lot of this award is being the identity of your team. And when you're a wide receiver, your stats are just tethered to the quarterback. And guys like Cooper Kupp and Justin Jefferson and Tyreek Hill, they've been able to separate from that because they've been seen as just significantly, I guess, better than their quarterbacks and just having such an overwhelming percentage of their team's productions. But like when you're the running back, like you're not tethered to the quarterback as much. And you can be seen more, I think, as throwing the team on your back and having all of the narrative aspects, as well as, you know, and I think the Breece is just going to put up monster stats if he stays healthy, and there's more attrition with running backs than wide receivers. So that's the drawback. But again, Breece is like 3 times the price of Jamar Chase and CD Lamb and these guys, and I don't think he should be. All right. It will be a championship Sunday to remember, Drew. Manchester City eyes an unprecedented 4th consecutive title, and Arsenal aims to finish atop the table for the first time in 20 years. Find out who is crowned this weekend on the networks of NBC Universal. And speaking of that, Man City are minus 1,600 to win the Premier League title. Arsenal are plus 900 on the other side of that. And this basically comes down to Man City being minus 900 on the 3-way money line, home to West Ham, and Arsenal being minus 550 home to Everton. Do you think there's any chance that there could be a surprise thrown up on the final day? Or do you think when Heung-min Son missed that one-on-one against Stefan Ortega at the death at the London Stadium in front of a very confused Tottenham crowd that didn't know what to cheer for, do you think the title was decided then?
I think the title was decided then, and actually top 4 for Aston Villa. was
Yes.
decided then. We had some of that from our preseason talking about the Premier League. So I didn't even know that until I saw, like, I didn't know that was at stake. I kind of assumed it was, it was gonna, we still had some sort some stuff out, but no, that was a wild outcome. And no, I don't think ultimately Arsenal has much of a prayer here. And I think if you, if you want to try to leverage any type of, what does Arsenal need to do to, to keep themselves in the mix, like they could score 3 goals against Everton. Everton is not a team that I rate especially well at all, and I think this is probably an opportunity for them to, if nothing else, get out a little bit of frustration, and it's their own fault, so I don't feel too bad for them. But I think, the Arsenal Everton total looks a hair low to me, and I think Arsenal can get to 3 goals in this one.
Yep. The Totally Football Show, which is a really good podcast, if you want to get into soccer. One of the guys there put it really well, that this final stretch for Arsenal has been like they get broken in the first game of a 5th set, and they're going up against like John Isner on the other side. And it's like, oh, yeah, I've helped serve. We get another chance to break. Oh, I lost the Isner held to love again. Oh, City beat Fulham by a lot again, and you just can't quite get the look. Though that Tottenham game, Tottenham had break point for Arsenal, and Son, which was, I think, 0.54 XG on his shot. The fact that he wasn't able to finish that, I think that's probably the title. I will say, though, that City they can get a little shaky. Like a couple of years ago on the final day, they had this same situation, just needed to beat Aston Villa to win the title, and they went 2-0 down, and they looked rattled. And just weird things happened on these final days. Like Dortmund to win the Bundesliga last year under Edin Terzic. They were, I believe, minus 1,000 home to Mainz on the final day. Just needed to win. It's minus 1,000 favorites against a Mainz mid-table team that had nothing to play for, and they just completely bottled it. And they had no idea what they were doing, and they just absolutely melted, and everything compounded on itself. Gave up a weird goal, and they missed a penalty, and then all of a sudden they just completely broke. Like they could not pass the ball sideways to each other. They were just overwhelmed by the moment. Now, it's different that happening to Dortmund than the machine that is Manchester City, but I don't know. Man City weren't great against Tottenham. They did not play very well in that game. The first half was a mess. They had no plan, seemingly. It was like Tottenham set up in this very pronounced midfield box, where they just had all their players clustered in the middle of the park, and were like, you are not passing through us. And City were like, we're going to try pass through you. It's like, just kick it out wide to Kyle Walker, and he has an acre of space. So little potential for weirdness here. This West Ham team isn't terrible. David Moyes' last game. So I think that there is a little bit of scope. I think more scope than your typical minus 900 favorite, just because of the strange emotion of the day, and perhaps Moyes wanting to go out in a blaze of glory. But Man City, they are minus 1,600 for a reason.
Yeah.
So
West Ham has 2 of their last 4 matches. They conceded 5 goals. It was against against some fine but not super impressive competition. But I will point, Man City's we didn't even mention goalkeeper Ederson out for the rest of the season with an eye injury, and Kevin De Bruyne did look like he picked up some sort of niggling injury against Tottenham. So tough to say how healthy he's going to be for this contest, and he obviously matters a ton for them in terms of producing goals. So yeah, I wouldn't say that this is a done deal by any stretch of the imagination, but to me, I'm not interested in Arsenal 9-1. I think I'm more inclined to try to buy low on or I guess sell high on the Everton defense, which has been somewhat solid of late. But I don't think they have the chops to go toe to toe with Arsenal here.
Yep, no, probably right. Before we move off soccer, a quick shout out to my buddies at Stade Brestois, who clinched top 4 a couple of days ago when you're listening to this, after Nice lost to PSG. Stade Brestois, 14th highest wage bill in Ligue 1. Their stadium isn't even fit for Champions League games. Like, they're going to have to fix their stadium because it seats like 15,000 people or something. It doesn't conform to UEFA's expectations. So very plucky performance all season, and I don't understand how they finished top 4. I've watched all their games. They're not very good, but they just gutted out and they've come through in big moments. And they saw it through to the end. So go Le Rouge. Good job by Brest. Anyway, let's pivot to away from the north of France, just across the Atlantic to the New York Knickerbockers, who play in Indiana on Friday night. The line is Pacers -5.5. The total is 215.5. The Knicks are -250 to win the series. Pacers +200. Do you think that the series is going to go to a game 7 on Sunday?
I think it is. And I don't have high conviction in that, but boy, oh boy, the Pacers are Jekyll and Hyde home and away. My goodness gracious. And a ton of it comes down to shooting for whatever reason. They generated better looks and they knocked down their shots at home, and they couldn't do it in the Garden for whatever reason. Now, I will say this, the tactical approach that Rick Carlisle rolled out for the first half of Game 5, fireball offense, even having won a playoff series against the Bucks, as impressive as that will look on his resume, putting Nembhard back on Jalen Brunson and letting Brunson just absolutely cook for the first half of that game made no sense to me. And I think that was probably a lesson learned, where you're going to get a more aggressive approach on specifically defending Brunson in this game. I mean, ask any other Knick to beat you. Seriously, I honestly do not understand why, that they're unable to, kind of force the action away from him, or force him to, that the double teams we saw and the one-on-one from Nesmith defending Brunson in Game 3, and then carried into Game 4, where you basically just got the Knicks to quit, was mad. It was masterful, and I would expect you to see that, and I would expect the shot making is good, and I think this is Pacers or pass, and I think this is over or pass, because I was a little caught by surprise with what the Knicks did in Game 6 against Philly. In terms of their interest in pushing the pace and really trying to, kind of their urgency to end the series there and not send it back to Madison Square Garden for 7. And I think if there's a little bit of a repeat of history where they really do try to kind of lean into a little bit faster pace and match fire with fire and steal it late against the Pacers, then 215 could get absolutely blown away here as a total. And I am never a person who really advocates for betting overs late in series because it's usually a lag in terms of catching up with the decrease in possessions, anchored by the games we've already seen. But that said, you're talking about a much more efficient offense for the Pacers at home. And you could see, fire match fire in terms of pace here, which would, potentially cook 215. So I played under in Game 5 pretty aggressively. I got lucky. I think I'm going to play some over kind of moderately here in Game 6. And I think if the Knicks win, I think this over is probably not, it's probably going well over, right? I do not see a game result where the Knicks win and it's because they kept the Pacers under 100 at home.
Yep. This is, maybe clearly a slightly off-market prediction, but I think the Knicks are going to win this game. And particularly, I think it's a bet relative to price of +200 on the money line. And the reason is that I think a lot of this series is just Brunson's health and the Knicks' energy levels. And I think that they have a level that they can get to just with intensity, with offensive rebounding, with playing hard, that I just don't think Indiana can match. And that really surfaced in the second half of Game 2, where the Knicks just came at Indiana like an avalanche when Brunson came back from his foot injury. And it happened basically for the entirety of Game 5. And then when you look at the rest of the series, I thought the Knicks played really poorly in Game 1. Just didn't think they were at the races at all, just making weird mental mistakes, not getting back in transition, doing very un-Knicksy things. They still pull it out and win by 4 with the aid of the Miles Turner allegedly moving screen. I think it kind of gets underrated that Game 2, Jalen Brunson missed the entire second quarter, the last 3 minutes of the first quarter, and then OG Anunoby went down, and the Knicks still won by 9. And then Game 3 with Brunson a little banged up, that game goes down to the wire. Tibbs, I think, not optimally, still starting Precious at that point. And the Knicks probably win and go up 3-0 if they can get a defensive rebound before Nembhard hits the prayer 3 at the death. And then game 4, I think they just let go of the rope with just everything that they've been building and the health situations. They've been playing every other day. But I think just with the 2 days off and with how good Brunson looked and how uninhibited he looked in game 5, I think the Knicks are going to bring their A game and bring intensity. And I think that gut feel, I think that they're going to win and the series is done. I just don't think this Pacers team is very good.
Okay. So that you just pushed me over the edge. I'm firing over. Because again, like the Pacers aren't very good, but they're at least better shot makers at home. So this is going to be a war. Like this looking carbon copy of Game 6 in Philly, 118-115 in favor of the Knicks. Sure. Like I'll probably play small overs, but I don't think I think that in large part there's no solving what either of these teams wants to do plan A offensively with the personnel available.
Yep. I just think that after what happened in game 4 and with how well the Knicks played in game 5 and the health level Brunson showed, I just don't think they're just going to no-show game 6 and be like, we're keeping bullets in the chamber to save for game 7. Like they've had 2 days off. I think that they're going to bring their A game, and I just don't really think the Pacers can get there. Like they just don't have players who play at that level of playoff intensity, for a better term, lack of a better term. So I think the Knicks get it done. All right, let's go to Thunder-Mavs, which is one of the strangest series of recent vintage. A very strange game 4 and game 5, and now game 6 in Dallas. Mavericks, they opened 4.5-point favorites. That has gotten unsurprisingly bet down to now 3.5, given that games 3 and 4 close to pick. And then the over-under is 209.5. The Mavs now minus 375 to win the series. Do you think that Dallas has checkmated OKC and that this is going to be a wrap, or do you think there's another twist?
I think and hope there will be another twist, although I will completely own this series is breaking my brain. I don't understand a lot of the coaching decisions. I don't understand some of the outlier good performances and bad performances we're seeing at times. And, if you want to encapsulate what happened in game 5, well, the 2-star players for the Mavs both played well on the same night for the first time in a while. And what happened with the Thunder, their plan B or, beyond Shea was a disaster. Jalen Williams did nothing. Chet did not look comfortable at all. And, I think, that if you tell me that game 6 is going to be, well, all the key players for the Thunder all finally have their good game at the same time, then the Thunder could win this one comfortably because, we have seen it. Like this Thunder team, when they're playing their best and everybody's contributing at a high level is outstanding. And I don't really understand why Dagenau, who I have a huge amount of respect for, isn't coaching up Jalen Williams to play to better spots, better opportunities, and less of what is clearly and obviously not working going at the rim. And I don't understand why he has not kind of settled on Giddey not being a viable player when one of the key offensive creators for the Mavericks is on the floor. So most of the Giddey kind of persecution came at the expense of how lost he was offensively, but he's a huge defensive liability, even more so than the offense, and that's at least in terms of what matters now. And I'm confused and I don't understand why the Thunder weren't more of a compelling why it was kind of a non-compete at home in game 5. And I didn't even their attitude confused me too. Like everything about it was just like, what is happening here? So I'm riding out this one to the death with them. And I looked hard at actually putting more into this series and the Western Conference at price today, because I still think that if they're still the healthiest and they still have the most kind of gas in the tank if they can put together a good game. I just need the real Jalen Williams to show up on Saturday.
Well, maybe the real Jalen Williams has showed up, and that's the problem.
That's not what I want to hear.
He doesn't have a lot of craft in his game at the moment. But
yeah.
I think there's a natural tendency to regress back to the idea that a coach is making the optimal decisions, particularly when it's a coach who is seemingly as good as Mark Daigneault, who has had a 100% approval rating, more or less, ever since he took over in OKC. But if there was ever a series where I could just sit down with a coach and just ask him a few questions and get some explanations, this would be the one. Where there's the Giddey stuff. Why doesn't Casey Wallace play more? Why doesn't Casey Wallace just start? That's one. But to me, the more pertinent thing is, like, Mark, what is your game plan on offense? And why is the spacing always so bad? Why is Lou Dort or Casey Wallace, why are they ever in the dunker spot? They are always in the dunker spot, clogging up the lane. And so when Shea or J-Dub, when they are driving, there are guys helping off Lou Dort or Casey Wallace in the dunker spot. It just makes no sense to me whatsoever what the upside is of having, one, really anyone there, and then two, if someone's going to be there, why isn't it the big? Like, why do you have smalls in the dunker spot? And then the other thing is just like the spacing play-by-play. I was looking back at some of this today. There's a play in the fourth quarter. Shea is driving, and there are so he's at the top of the arc, centrally positions, and there are three shooters on the strong side, and then there's Casey Wallace, who is the lone shooter in the weak side corner. And then Shea drives strong side, which he tends to do. And it's just he's driving into this massive crowd where the guys who are helping off the strong side can basically deter him and deter the shooter at the same time. It's so cramped. It's like, can we just run a play where you have three shooters on the weak side, you have Chet Holmgren, strong side corner, and you just have Shea cook his man at the top of the arc because no one can stay in front of him. Like, why don't we just spam that? Like, why can we see if that works? I just don't understand anything that they're doing on offense. It seems like they're all just kind of rattled going to the rim. But I think the being rattled at the rim and driving into all this length is because the spacing is so bad, and it doesn't need to be so bad. Like, you have guys who can shoot. It's just everyone is so poorly positioned on the floor that there's no room to operate. And then I think the other big problem, and I think this has to be the biggest adjustment, I think they will do this. These guys on OKC, when they get a semi-open three, they just need to shoot the goddamn ball. Like, they are, if they sense that any length is coming at them whatsoever, they hesitate, they pump fake, and then they drive into length, and then we just rinse, repeat this over and over again. Not going to take the shot, drive into nothing, and then kick out to nothing, and then just do it again. Like, if Isaiah Joe is remotely open, he needs to launch it. If Josh Giddey is on the floor, which at this point I don't really think he should ever be on the floor, but if he is, like a 33% wide open Josh Giddey three, that's better than what you're getting in the half court now. You've just got to shoot it. So they just need to be more decisive. They need to fix the spacing. And if they do that, like with Luka was very good in game 5, but I think a lot of that was just the threes were going in. Like, he doesn't look healthy still. This series should be winnable. I'm just loath to predict that things are going to drastically change in game 6 when they've looked the same for games 1 through 5. But what do you think is happening?
No, that your breakdown was as good as we're going to do. Thanks to you for kind of being able to nail more of the basketball X's and O's than I can. But that all makes perfect sense to me. And I think the only other thing I can add is, I don't know, can we close out on PJ Washington in the corner at some point? Like, he's obviously feeling it. That's kind of a huge element of the Mavs offense. And I don't. Every time you see the pass going out there and he's standing there, you're like, oh, walk away. Like, it's just happening. I would love for that play to stop working. Yeah.
I do think with OKC that they are being exposed a little bit. I don't think this is like purely coaching or the Mavs being incredible, which, to be fair, they have been awesome, and they are playing with a ton of focus and intention and intensity, and they're out efforting OKC, and they're outsmarting and out coaching them at the moment. But there are certain things where it's a real problem that the two best passers on the team are Josh Giddey and Gordon Hayward, and both of them are unplayable. Like, Shea is magnificent. I think about the same of Shea out of this series so far as I did before. He's a pass grade, but he's not an amazing passer. Like, he's not Luka Doncic. He's not a technician in the pick and roll. He's okay as a passer, but that's not really his game. He is driving to score for the most part. J-Dub just is doing the head down to the rim, tunnel vision, just hope to out-athlete guys at the rim, and he's getting swatted over and over again. He just doesn't seem to have the craft where to me, J-Dub right now, he reminds me of Tyrese Maxey last year, where it's like two moves, either step back jumper or like full speed NOS drive to the rim. And there's kind of nothing else. Like it's just it's one of those two things. Not a great passer either at this point. And so just the lack of craft, the lack of in-between game, the lack of passing, I think is exposing them where like it just looks like a college offense at the moment. It's just drive and kick, but then they're not shooting once they kick. I do think some things, I thought they just in game 5, they just played with low effort and intensity. Like why did the Dallas keep on dunking? Like why are you giving up these dunks in transition? Josh Giddey had the worst transition defense sequence I've ever seen in a playoff game, where he kind of half-heartedly lunges at Luka while he's retreating back, and then basically they just get a dunk out of that. So I think that'll get fixed up. I think they will fix some of the things with this 2 days off, but I mean, they're at the minus 375 for a reason to win the season.
Did you not watch much of the Isaiah Thomas Celtics?
Yeah, I watched plenty of Isaiah Thomas Celtics.
That's the low bar for me with transition D.
Yeah, it's not good at the moment. I still back some Thunder plus 1250 West today, and that it's just not the right price. Like you add up the series prices, and you're just not going to get there. So I don't like adding Thunder, but I still don't think that price really makes sense because they have home court in the Western Finals, and they're not going to be north of plus 200 average price, even if it feels like they are being exposed. So with stuff like that, I think sometimes you just have to take the price and then just hope that it's going to look a bit different in time. But all right, let's close out with Stanley Cup Playoffs. Before we get there, the second leg of the Triple Crown will be run on Saturday. Watch the Preakness Stakes at Pimlico Racecourse. The action starts at 4:30 p.m. Eastern on NBC and Peacock. All right, Stanley Cup Playoffs. We have a lot of series that are close at the moment, perhaps closer than expected. Some road teams winning game 5s to extend the series. Any overarching takeaways at the moment, Drew?
Need some roadies to step up in game 6s, Jay. The performance by the Stars was distressing, to say the least. They felt like they had been getting better defensively and goalkeeping through each series to that point until, the Avs finally, I guess, with their backs against the wall, produced a masterpiece offensively. But I would very much like Panthers through. No opinion on Rangers Hurricanes, although that feels like it's going to go 7 to me. And then I think the Oilers Stars is our Western Conference Finals. I'm very hopeful of that. And nothing that I've seen has really shaken my confidence in that to this point, but there's a lot of hockey to be played still.
Yep. I agree with that. I think that at the moment, the bets to be made are still what I said previously about if you want to back the Panthers, just back Barkov and Kachuk at their current prices to win the Conn Smythe. The market is saying that they are far less than 85, 90% of the Panthers' equity, and I disagree with that. I think they are about 85%. There's some chance that Bobrovsky could get really hot like he did last year, but he's at such a deficit with his counting stats now. And then Carter Verhaeghe, he could surge and end up, lapping them in points. But again, that's unlikely. He's 3 points behind, and he's just he's not as good as those guys. 2, he doesn't have the rep of Kachuk or Barkov. So those would be my bets at the moment. And then in the Western Conference, and we're recording before the Oilers played the Canucks. The Stars really should close out the series against the Avs in Game 5. They're up 2-1, kind of rolling, look in control, and Chris Tanev takes a stupid penalty, and then the Avs score off of that, and then Ottinger doesn't cover himself in glory in the third period, and so now it's not wide open. The Avs are minus 120 in Game 6, and they'll be dogs in Game 7, so still very much in the Stars' court. But that one is no longer book closed. I tell you what, being against the Avs is terrifying. I do not like cheering against Nathan McKinnon and Cale Makar. It's just absolutely terrifying. Every time McKinnon touches the puck, I just feel like he's just in my living room holding a knife. I just don't feel like he's going to get stopped. But as you can see, if you're watching that on YouTube, that the Avs are minus 120 in Game 6 with Devon Taves back, though there will be no more Nichushkin for a while following his suspension. Did you see any of Game 5, Avs Stars?
Yeah, I watched a good amount of it, particularly the third period, as I was like, just come on, guys, get a fourth. Let's tie this up, and not to be. Yeah, I still think the Stars are a much better team. We just need one clean. I think they're going to get it in 6, personally. I like them in Game 6.
Yeah, I think ultimately, over the 5 games so far, they have shown that they have been the better team. Now, that can change in Game 6 or 7. It's small sample. McKinnon and Makar, terrifying. Knife in the living room, et cetera, et cetera. They could absolutely win those 2 games, but I feel like the Stars have controlled the balance of play, and I think it's relevant as well that the Avs did not hold a lead in a single game until the third period of Game 5, if you consider that, they walked it off in Game 1 with the OT winner. So I think the Stars will take care of business, but Rope Hintz being an injury concern is a bit of a worry, but ultimately I think they will get it done. All right, we are done for now. Don't forget to check out NBCsports.com for more information to help you with your wagers. Thanks to those of you watching on the NBC Sports YouTube channel. And if you're listening to us in podcast form, don't forget to rate and subscribe. Also a reminder to find all your favorite NBC Sports shows on Amazon Music. Just head to amazon.com/NBC Sports. From Jay Croucher and Drew Dinsick, we'll see you next week.